3 weeks before my daughter's wedding, the wedding I was paying $40,000 for, she sent me a text that said I could come if I still paid, but I shouldn't expect a seat up front. I read it twice. Then I typed back one line that I meant with my whole heart, and I hit send. 1 hour later, she was sobbing into the phone asking me what I had done. But by then it was already too late, because the second I put that phone down, I didn't sit there and cry. I picked up the green folder off my counter, the one with my name on every single contract, and I called my lawyer at 11 at night. My name is Opal Tyndall. I'm 61 years old, and I built everything I have with 2 scarred hands and a rented oven. And this is the story of how the woman they called the Cake Lady took back $40,000 and her dignity in the very same afternoon. If you're listening from somewhere far away, drop your city in the comments. And please stay with me until the end, because I promise you, the part where it all comes apart for them is worth the wait. Let me start at the beginning, because you need to understand who I am before you can understand why I did what I did. I own a bakery, Tyndall's Bakehouse, right on Marish Street in Haddon County. And if you live anywhere near here, you've eaten my cake, whether you know it or not. 26 years I've been at it. I started in a rented oven in the back of a diner that let me bake overnight after they closed, and I'd be there from midnight till the sun came up, flour to my elbows, my daughter asleep in a car seat on the prep table because I couldn't afford a sitter and there was nobody else. Her daddy had decided about 2 minutes after she was born that fatherhood wasn't really his thing, and he was gone before she could say his name. So it was me. Just me and a busted hand mixer and a recipe my own mother left me on an index card so old the corners had gone soft. People think baking is soft work. Sweet work. It is not. It's burns. And it's 2 in the morning, and it's lifting 50-pound sacks of flour with a bad back, and it's standing on a concrete floor for 14 hours until your feet feel like they belong to somebody else. Look at my arms sometime. There's a burn scar that runs from my wrist halfway to my elbow, white and shiny, from the second year when a sheet pan of caramel went over and I caught it instead of letting it hit the floor because I could not afford to lose that batch. I didn't even go to the hospital. I wrapped it in a wet towel and I finished the order because the order was a christening and that family was counting on me. And back then, every order was the difference between making rent and not. I used to be embarrassed by that scar. I'd wear long sleeves in July. I'm not embarrassed anymore. It's the truest thing about me, that scar. It says I stayed when staying cost something. And here's the part that matters, the part that's going to make this whole thing land later. So hold on to it. I am the wedding cake lady of this county. Not one of them, the one. When the Hartwell girl got married, that was my cake. When the mayor's son got married, mine. 3 generations of brides in this town have cut into something I made with these hands at 4 in the morning. I have made the cake for damn near every important day this community has had for a quarter century. I make other people's weddings beautiful for a living. Remember that. Because in about 10 minutes, I'm going to tell you how I got pushed out of my own daughter's. Her name is Wren. She's 28 now, and she is the whole reason I ever got out of bed. I raised her alone, and I would lie down in traffic for that girl. I need you to know that going in, because some of what I'm about to tell you is going to make you angry at her, and I don't want you angrier at her than I am. I gave her everything I had. Wasn't money. Not at first, there wasn't any. It was the other stuff. I never missed a single recital, even when I came straight from the bakery, still smelling like vanilla and scorched sugar, and sat in the back in my work clothes while the other moms wore real outfits. I put her through college $100 at a time, wiring it from the shop account between orders. I told her every day of her life that she could be anybody she wanted to be, and she believed me. She went out and became somebody. Marketing, advertising, the kind of job where you wear nice shoes and nobody's ever burned themselves on a sheet pan. Smart, polished, ambitious. And somewhere along the way, just a little ashamed. The way kids get sometimes when they climb up out of where they came from and start looking back down at it. She started telling people her mother was in artisanal food. Not my mom owns a bakery. Not my mom bakes wedding cakes. Artisanal food. like I was running some pop-up in Brooklyn instead of standing on a concrete floor in Haddon County at 4 in the morning. I let it slide. Pride is a complicated thing in a kid who watched her mama scrub burned sugar off her own arm so there'd be money for school clothes. Then she met Spencer Ashford. Now, you've got to understand what the Ashford name means around here, or at least what it used to mean. Old money, or the memory of old money, which around these parts turns out to be a real different thing. The Ashfords ran the textile mills back, when the mills ran everything. 3 generations of them, the kind of family that had their name on a building downtown, and a grandfather who summered places and knew people. They wore that last name like a crown that had been in the family so long nobody bothered to check if the gold was real anymore. And Wren fell for Spencer, and I think she fell a little bit for the whole world he came wrapped in. The ease of it, the belonging, the way those people walk into a restaurant like the floor was put there for them specifically. And honestly, I was happy for her. My girl, marrying into a family that would never have to count pennies the way we'd counted them. I cried when she told me, good tears. So I did the thing I'd been dreaming about, doing her whole life. I offered to pay for the wedding, the whole thing, $40,000, every cent of it earned standing up before dawn. It was the proudest check I ever planned to write. I'd been saving towards something like it without even knowing it, and I thought, this is it. This is what the Burns were for. Then I met Marguerite. Marguerite Ashford is Spencer's mother, and she is the kind of woman who can make you feel poor in a thrift store. We met at a dinner to celebrate the engagement. I wore my good dress, the navy one, and I got my hair done, and I brought flowers because that's what you do. And I walked in there determined to be liked. I sat down at that table ready to love these people because they were going to be Wren's family. Marguerite took my hand for exactly as long as politeness required, the way you'd hold something you weren't sure was clean. And she looked at me with this little smile, and she goes, Wren tells us you're in baking. She said the word baking the way you'd say a mild rash. How charming. There's such a sweet little market for that sort of thing these days. 26 years, I told her. Built it from a rented oven. And she goes, how wonderful that people still want those homemade touches. And then she turned to talk to somebody who mattered more. That was it. That was the whole relationship, right there in the first 90 seconds. To Marguerite, I was the help that had somehow gotten above itself. A woman who made cake for a living, sitting at her table, presuming to be family. I didn't have the name. I didn't have the bloodline. I had a checkbook and a scar, and only one of those things interested her. But here's the thing that happened at that dinner that I want you to really sit with, because it's the first cut and it tells you everything. Toward the end of the meal, Marguerite gets this thoughtful look, and she dabs her mouth with the napkin, and she says, now, about the cake. There's a patisserie in the city, Beaulieu, absolutely exquisite. They did the Carrington wedding, and I really do think for an event of this caliber, we ought to go with something more elevated. You understand, Opal? The cake at an Ashford wedding makes a statement. She wanted to hire somebody else to bake my daughter's wedding cake. While I sat right there, the wedding cake lady of the whole county and her future-in-law was suggesting they import a fancier cake from the city because mine wasn't elevated enough for the Ashford name. I felt my face go hot. I opened my mouth and I didn't even know what I was going to say. And then Wren spoke up. My Wren. She put her fork down and she said, actually, Marguerite, I want my mom's cake. It wouldn't be my wedding without it. I've been eating her cake my whole life. It was a small thing. It lasted maybe 4 seconds. Marguerite gave this tight little nod and said, of course, dear, whatever you like, in a voice that meant the exact opposite. But I caught the look on my daughter's face. After she said it, there was something in it, something that flickered. Almost like she expressed herself. Like for 1 second, the old Wren, the one who used to lick the bowl, standing on a step stool in my kitchen, came back into her eyes and put her foot down. I held on to that look for a long time. Through everything that came after, I held on to it. Because I knew, even then, that the girl who said I want my mom's cake was still in there somewhere underneath the nice shoes and the artisanal food. She was just buried, and it was going to take the worst night of both our lives to dig her back out. I drove home from that dinner telling myself it was fine. Marguerite was a snob, sure, but every family's got one, and the point was Wren was happy. So she got a chilly mother-in-law, so what? I'd swallowed worse than a cold handshake and a comment about homemade touches. I'd been swallowing things my whole life. That's what people like me do. We swallow it, we smile, we pay, and we tell ourselves it's love. I had no idea yet that the swallowing was the whole plan, that a woman who'd built a company from one rented oven was about to get treated like staff at the most important event she would ever pay for. And I sure didn't know that the one thing those people never thought to check, the one thing nobody ever bothers to check about the cake lady, was about to take their whole gleaming wedding apart at the seams. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how they took it over. Because it didn't happen all at once. It never does. It happened the way these things always happen. Slowly and then all at once, and the whole time dressed up as help. Now here's the part nobody saw coming, and the reason nobody saw it coming is that nobody ever pays attention to what the cake lady is doing with the paperwork. When I agreed to pay for that wedding, I did not hand anybody a check for $40,000. I have never in my life handed anybody a blank check, and I sure wasn't about to start with people who looked at me the way Marguerite looked at me. I did it the way I've done everything in 26 years of business. I became the customer, every single vendor, the venue, the caterer, the florist, the band, the rental company, all of it. I sat down with each one and I signed the contracts myself. Opal Tyndall, responsible party, right there on the signature line in my own handwriting. I paid the deposits out of my company account. I negotiated the terms, because Lord knows I've negotiated enough vendor contracts in my life to do it in my sleep. When you run a bakery, you live and die by contracts with suppliers, with venues, with couples who change their minds about everything 2 days before the event. A contract is the only promise that holds up after people stop being nice to each other. I learned that the hard way more than once, and I was not about to forget it just because this time the event was my own daughter's. So I called Renata Voss. Renata's been my lawyer for 18 years. She's the one who's kept my shop out of trouble through 2 lease disputes, a supplier who tried to stiff me, and a slip and fall that turned out to be a scam. She is the most careful human being I have ever met, and she charges me like it, and she's worth every dime. I had her read every contract before I signed a thing. And Renata, she's going through the venue contract with that red pen of hers, and she stops and she taps the page and she goes, Opal, you see this? You structured these the way you structure everything. You put almost nothing down up front, and you backloaded the balance to right before the event. You've got maybe 4,000 in deposits across all of these. The other 36,000 isn't due until 2 weeks out. I told her that's just how I do it. Keeps my cash working as long as possible. Old habit. And she looks at me over her glasses and she says, well, it means something here you might want to know about. You are the sole responsible party on every one of these contracts. Not Wren, not the Ashfords, you. Nobody else has the authority to spend a single dollar of this or change a single term. And since the real money hasn't gone anywhere yet, it's still sitting in your account. It's still yours until the day you pay it, just so you know where you stand. Why would that matter? I said. It's my daughter's wedding. No reason, Renata said, and she capped the pen. Just always good to know where you stand. That's all I do, Opal. I tell people where they stand. I put all those contracts in a green accordion folder, the one I use for the important stuff, and I filed it on the shelf in my kitchen at home, and I forgot about it. I want you to remember that folder, because in a few weeks it's going to be sitting on my counter at 11 at night while I make the biggest decision of my life. But right then it was just paperwork, boring grown-up paperwork. I had no idea I'd just quietly built myself the only door out of a room I didn't even know I was about to get locked inside. Because here's what I started figuring out over the next couple months, slow, the way you notice a leak before you find it. The Ashfords were broke, not broke like me at 25, eating cereal for dinner so the baby could have milk. Broke like rich people get broke, which is a sneakier kind, a kind that wears a good coat. The mills had been closed for 30 years. The money that built that name had dried up 2 generations back, and what was left was the name itself. The house, and a bottomless screaming need to be seen as people who still mattered. The big house out on Ridgeline that everybody in town knew, the one with the columns? The roof leaked. I found that out by accident. Spencer mentioned it once, said they kept meaning to get to it. They kept meaning to get to it for 6 years. There were buckets in the upstairs hallway of the Grand Ashford estate. Buckets. And Marguerite, the great Marguerite, had been quietly selling off the family silver for years to keep the lights on. Jewelry, antiques, a painting here and there. I learned later she'd sold her own mother's pearls to a dealer 2 counties over so nobody local would see. All of it to keep up the front. To keep throwing the kind of parties and wearing the kind of clothes that told everybody the Ashfords were still the Ashfords. Old money with empty pockets is the proudest and the most dangerous kind of broke there is, because it's got nothing left to protect except the appearance of having something. And here came Opal Tyndall, the cake lady, with an actual checkbook, offering to fund the exact kind of wedding that would let the Ashfords prove to the whole county that they were still somebody. A 400 guest, crystal and orchids, senator on the guest list kind of wedding. The kind they could not have paid for themselves if they'd sold the whole house and the buckets too. They wanted my money. God, they wanted it. They needed it so bad they could taste it. They just could not stand the idea of me sitting at the good table while they spent it. They wanted the check and not the face. And I didn't understand that yet, not fully, because I was still over here trying to be liked, still bringing flowers, still wearing the navy dress. The takeover happened the way these things always happen. Slowly, and then all at once, and the entire time dressed up like a favor. First, Marguerite just had a few thoughts about the venue. The place Wren and I had picked, this beautiful old restored barn out by the orchard, string lights and exposed beams, the kind of place that looks like a magazine. Suddenly, that wasn't quite right. Wasn't it a little rustic? For the Ashford name? There was this country club 30 miles out, the Wickersham, terribly exclusive, and Marguerite knew a member. And wouldn't that be more appropriate? So the venue changed to a place I'd never have picked, that cost more, that I was now on the hook for. Then it was the flowers. My florist, a woman named Pia, who I've sent 100 brides to, who does the most gorgeous wildflower work you ever saw, suddenly Pia wasn't going to cut it. Marguerite had a florist, the good florist, the one who does it right. Then it was the guest list. And this is where it really got out of hand, because the guest list is where you find out whose wedding it actually is. It started swelling. Ashford cousins I'd never heard of. Cabot's business contacts, and I use the word business loosely, because I'd come to find out most of Cabot. Ashford's business was debt wearing a nice suit. People who could do the family some good. A state senator named Bram Holloway that they were apparently friendly with, and they could not stop talking about Holloway. Holloway this, and Holloway that, like having him in the room was the whole point of the day. And every name they added pushed one of mine out, my sister, my 2 oldest friends. Darlene, who's run my bakery floor for 22 years and is more family to me than half my actual blood. The people who'd actually held me and Wren up for 28 years got squeezed down to a handful of seats at the back, while the Ashfords filled the room with strangers who could do them favors. It's just that we know so many people, Marguerite explained to me with that smile. And you understand, Opal dear, a wedding is really about bringing the families together. The Ashford name carries certain expectations. Bit by bit, the wedding I was paying for stopped being Wren's and mine and turned into theirs. The invitations went out, and when I saw one, I had to sit down, because there at the top was the Ashford family crest, an actual crest, like we were in the Middle Ages. My $40,000, and the invitation had their coat of arms on it and described Wren as marrying into the prominent Ashford family, and mentioned that Mr. and Mrs. Cabot Ashford would be hosting, with my money. There was not one word about me anywhere on that invitation. Not the bride's mother, not Tyndall, nothing. I had been erased clean off the paper I was paying for. I'd call Wren about some detail, the cake flavors, the colors, just wanting to be part of it, and she'd say, "Oh, Marguerite already handled that, Mom. She's got such a good eye for this stuff. A good eye, with my money." And I kept telling myself it didn't matter. Let Marguerite have her crest and her senator. The point was Wren, happy, marrying a man she loved. If getting elbowed to the side was the price of my girl's joy, I'd pay it the way I'd paid every other price in my life. Quietly, on my feet at 4 a.m, without making a scene. That's the trap, by the way. I see it now. That's the exact trap that catches every decent parent there is. They count on your love to make you swallow your own erasing. They count on you being too good a mother to make a fuss. Your decency becomes the leash they walk you on. And I'd been on that leash for months, calling it love the whole time. But the hardest part, the part that actually broke my heart, wasn't Marguerite. I could see Marguerite coming a mile off. I've been handled by snobs my whole career. I know that breed. No. The hardest part was watching it happen to Wren. My girl started changing. She started talking like them, started caring about things she never used to care about, the right handbag, the right zip code, whether a thing was done or not done. She got quieter with me, or maybe just busier. In that way, that means the same thing. The Sunday phone calls got shorter, and then they got rare. When I'd mentioned coming to a planning meeting, there'd be this little pause before she said it probably wasn't necessary. Marguerite had it covered. I'd hear that pause, and I'd feel it in my chest, and I understood it even while it was killing me. Wren had spent her whole childhood watching her mother get looked down on. She'd smelled the scorched sugar on me at her recitals. She'd seen the other parents' faces, and now here was this whole gleaming family offering to fold her into a world where nobody would ever look down on her again, where she could be an Ashford instead of the cake lady's daughter. And all she had to do to belong to them, all it cost, was to be just a little bit ashamed of me. And she was choosing it, a little at a time, the way you always choose the bad thing. One small, understandable, forgivable step at a time. But I'll tell you what I held on to. There was this one night, maybe 6 weeks before the wedding, she called me late, and her voice was different, smaller. The Marguerite was gone out of it. And she said, "Mom, do you remember the strawberry cake you used to make for my birthday? The one with the little wild strawberries from the side of the road?" And I said, "Of course I do, baby. I made you that cake 18 years running." And she was quiet for a second, and she said, "I miss that." And then real quick, like she'd caught herself, she said she had to go. Spencer was waiting, and she hung up. I sat there holding the phone a long time after that, because I heard it, underneath everything, underneath the nice shoes and the artisanal food, and the pause before she said my meeting as weren't necessary. I heard the girl who missed the strawberry cake. She was still in there, drowning, maybe. But in there, I kept thinking she'd snap out of it, that any day now she'd remember who sat in the back row in work clothes for 18 years of recitals. She would, eventually. But before she did, she was going to send me a text, and that text was going to be the worst thing my own child ever did to me. And it was also, though neither of us knew it yet, gonna be the thing that finally set us both free. Because the seating chart was coming, and I had no idea the Ashfords had already decided exactly where the cake lady was gonna sit. The seating chart turned out to be the battle nobody told me we were having. A seating chart is a small thing, and it's an enormous thing at the same time. It's a little piece of paper, and it's also a map of who matters, who's near the couple, who's stuck at the back by the kitchen doors, where the servers come and go and you can't hear the toasts. At a wedding, the front row is for the people who made you, the parents, the grandparents, the ones whose whole lives bent and broke around getting that kid to the altar. I never once thought about where I'd sit, because where else would the mother of the bride be but the front row? I'd paid for the room. I'd raised the bride. I'd earned that seat over 28 years and $40,000. It wasn't even a question in my mind. But the Ashfords had a different map. In their map, the front rows were for Ashfords, and for the people the Ashfords wanted to impress. Cabot's banker, Senator Holloway, cousins with the right last names. The front of that room was real estate, and to people clinging to a fading name, real estate is everything. There just wasn't room up front in their minds for a cake lady, even the one paying for the whole thing. I found out the way you always find out these things, by accident, in writing, in a way that can't be taken back or smoothed over with a smile. It was a Tuesday night. I was home, feet up, tired down to the bone after a 14-hour day, and my phone buzzed. It was an email, a draft of the seating chart and the day of program, and it had gone out to a group that included me by mistake. Some assistant of the planners had DC'd the whole vendor and family list instead of just the Ashfords. And I opened it, just curious, just wanting to see how it was all coming together. And I saw where they'd put me. Row 6, not a typo, row 6, behind the Ashford cousins, behind Cabot's banker, behind a state senator I had never met in my life. At my own daughter's wedding, the wedding I was paying $40,000 for, they had me in the 6th row, off to the side by the doors. I sat with that for a minute. I felt the heat come up the back of my neck, and then I kept reading because there was more, and the more was worse. Down in the program, in the section about the reception, there was a line about the cake, and it said the cake would be presented as a custom creation by Maison Beaulieu of the city. Beaulieu. The fancy patisserie Marguerite had wanted from the start, except I knew for a fact I was still baking that cake, because Wren had insisted, because of that one good moment at the dinner. I had the order written up. 4 tiers, the lemon elderflower Wren picked. I'd already done the tasting. I was going to be up at 3 a.m, the day before my own daughter's wedding, making that cake, with these 2 hands and this burned arm. And the program was going to tell 400 people it came from Beaulieu. You understand what that is. That's not even row 6. Row 6 just means they don't want my face up front. This was worse. They wanted my hands and not my name. They wanted me to make the most beautiful thing I've ever made for the most important day of my life. And then they wanted to put somebody else's label on it and serve it to a senator. They wanted to erase me off my own cake the way they'd erased me off the invitation. Take the work, hide the worker. That's the oldest trick there is against people like me. I've watched it done to every line cook and every cleaning crew and every seamstress in this country. I just never thought I'd watch it done to me on the day I became the mother of the bride. I called Wren about the seating. I want you to know I tried the calm way first, the reasonable mother-to-daughter way. I said, "Sweetheart, I just happened to see the seating chart. I think there's been a mistake. It's got me down in row 6. And there was this pause, and the pause told me everything before she said a word. It wasn't a mistake. "Oh, Mom," she said, and her voice was careful, rehearsed almost. "So, the thing is, the front rows are kind of spoken for. Marguerite's family is really big, and there are some important people coming onto Ashfordside. Anren," I said. "I'm the mother of the bride. I know. It's just Marguerite feels really strongly that the front should reflect, the families standing in the community." "The families standing," I repeated. "And I want you to know I said it real quiet." And then she said the thing I know in my gut she'd been coached to say, because it wasn't her voice in it, it was Marguerite's, coming out of my daughter's mouth like a hand puppet. She said, "Mom, honestly, it's not a big deal where you sit. You'll still be there. Why don't you just handle the money side and let the people who actually understand these events handle the details that matter? Just handle the money. Let the people who matter handle what matters." There it was. The whole thing said right out loud in my daughter's voice, my future in-law's words. I was not a mother to these people. I was a funding source, a checkbook with a pulse that they'd tolerate down in row 6, as long as the check cleared and the cake showed up with somebody else's name on it. I didn't yell. I have never been a yeller. You don't survive what I've survived by yelling. You survive it by staying calm while everything's on fire. That's a skill. That's a muscle. And I've got it built up like a weightlifter. So I just said, "I see. Let me think about it, Wren." And I hung up. And I sat in my quiet house with my scarred hands in my lap, and I should have known right then what I was going to do. But I gave them one more chance. God help me, I always give one more chance. I told Darlene about it the next morning. Darlene Pruitt has run my bakery floor for 22 years. She started as a part-time counter girl when she was 19, and now she runs 3/4 of my operation, and she tells me the truth whether I want to hear it or not, which is what a real friend is actually for. We were in the back, both of us with coffee, the oven's already going, and I told her, "Row 6, the cake. Just handle the money." And Darlene set her cup down so hard it sloshed. Opal, she said, listen to yourself. You are paying $40,000 to be told to sit in the back by the kitchen and keep your mouth shut, and to let some city bakery put their name on a cake you're going to break your back making. Are you hearing this out loud? It's Wren's day, I started. It's your money, Darlene said, and it's your kid. And they are teaching her to should be ashamed of you with your own wallet. You are financing the exact people who look down on you so they can look down on you more comfortably. She shook her head. My mama cleaned motel rooms till her knees gave out. Anybody tried to stick her in row 6 at my wedding, paid for or not, I'd have carried that woman to the front myself and let the snob sit in the parking lot. I didn't say anything. You always do this, Darlene said, softer now. You think being a good mother means disappearing. It doesn't, Opal. Sometimes being a good mother means showing your kid what a woman with some self-respect actually looks like. Because I promise you, she is never going to learn that from those people. The only place on earth she can learn it is from you. I drove home that night turning it over and over. Darlene was right, and I knew she was right. And I still wasn't sure I had it in me to do anything but swallow it one more time. That's the honest truth. I'd been swallowing things for so long I wasn't sure my throat knew how to do anything else. Then at 11:04 that night, my phone buzzed, and Wren made the decision for me. I found out later what happened on their end that day, and it's worth knowing. Marguerite had gotten word that the cake lady had made a fuss about the seating. To Marguerite, that was an outrage, the help forgetting its place. So she got to Wren that afternoon, worked on her, took my completely reasonable request to sit in the front row at my own daughter's wedding and spun it into me being difficult, making it about myself, threatening to ruin the day over a chair. By the time Wren picked up her phone that night, she wasn't really my daughter anymore. She was a scared girl who'd been told that the woman who raised her was a problem that needed managing, and that her whole place in that shiny Ashford world depended on her managing me. So she sent the text. And I don't think she even fully felt it as she typed it. I think she was repeating a position that had been installed in her, the way you repeat directions to a place you've never driven. But I felt it, every single word. Here it is, exactly how it came in, 11:04 on a Tuesday night, while I was sitting in my recliner with my feet up and that green folder sitting on the shelf across the room where I'd forgotten all about it. Mom, Marguerite, and I talked, and we really need you to drop the seating thing. It's causing so much stress. You can still come to the wedding if you're still covering it, but please don't expect a seat up front. The front is for the Ashford side and the important guests. Please just let this go. It's not about you. You can still come if you're still covering it, but don't expect a seat up front. I read it 3 times, and I waited for the hurt to take me down the way it had 100 times that year. I waited to cry, but something else came up instead. Something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. It came up through me clean and cold and clear, like the first cold water after you've been thirsty for days. And it wasn't rage and it wasn't grief. It was the feeling I get right before I sign a contract I've already decided is good. It was certainty. I looked across the room at that green folder on the shelf, the folder with my name on every single one of those vendor contracts. Opal Tyndall, responsible party. The folder Renata had handed me with the words, always good to know where you stand. I had spent months looking for the door and telling myself I'd never use it, that no good mother ever would. And my own daughter had just texted me directions straight to it. I set down the phone. I got up out of that recliner and I walked across the room and I took the folder off the shelf. And for the first time in months, Opal Tyndall stopped being a good sport and started being a businesswoman. I opened it up because I'm a professional, and a professional checks her position before she makes a move. And what I saw in there, in Renata's careful red pen, was that every single thread of that wedding ran through my signature. Pull me out, and there was no venue, no caterer, no flowers, no band. There was just a date, an address, and a family with a fading name in buckets in the upstairs hall. Then I picked up my phone and I typed back my answer. And I didn't type it in anger. I typed it slow, the way you write the most important line of a contract, because I wanted every word of it to be exactly true. Then I'll keep the 40,000 and you can keep the seat. I read it once, I meant it all the way down, and I hit send. Here's the part that the whole title of this story turns on, the part I'm proudest of, and it's got nothing to do with the money. I did not sit there and wait for her to call. I did not stew. I did not draft a follow-up text, didn't write and delete and rewrite some speech about my feelings. I've learned one thing in 26 years of running a business, and it's this. The time between a decision and the action on it is the only window where your nerve can fail you. The decision is clean, the action is clean. But that gap in the middle, that's where you talk yourself out of the right thing. That's where you go, oh, she's just stressed. Oh, it's the wedding. Oh, I'll bring it up gentle next week. That gap has swallowed more good decisions than fear ever did. So I gave my nerve no gap at all. I called Renata Voss at 11:09 at night. She picked up on the fourth ring, half asleep. Opal, it's after 11. Is the shop on fire? No, I said, but I need you to do something for me, and I need to tell you tonight, while I've still got the nerve. Because if I wait till morning, I'm scared. I'll go soft, and I do not want to go soft on this one. And something in my voice must have woken her all the way up, because when she spoke again, it was her business voice, the one I pay for. Okay, she said. Tell me. So I told her, the whole 8 months of it compressed down into about 90 seconds. The handshake, the cake comment, the crest on the invitation, the buckets in the hallway. Row 6. The cake getting Beaulieu's name. Just handle the money and let the people who matter handle what matters. And then the text. You can still come if you're still covering it. Renata was quiet for a moment, and then she said in a completely different voice, okay, what do you want to do? I want out, I said. All of it. The venue, the caterer, the flowers, the band, all of it. I'm the responsible party on every contract. I want to pull every dollar that hasn't been paid yet, and I want it started tonight before I can talk myself out of it. You understand what that means, Renata said. And she wasn't trying to talk me out of it. I want to be clear, she was doing her job. She was making sure I'd looked at the whole board. It means there's no wedding, not at these vendors, not on this date. I understand exactly what it means, I said. I've spent 8 months understanding it. They want my $40,000, and they want me in row 6, and they want my cake with another woman's name on it. They cannot have all three. They cannot have any of it, actually. I'm choosing which one I keep, and I'm keeping my dignity, because it's the only thing in this whole arrangement that was ever actually mine. All right, Renata said, and I could hear her sitting up, reaching for something to write with. I'll start first thing in the know, I said. Renata, start tonight. There was a pause. Opal, the vendor offices are closed. It's almost midnight. I know they're closed, I said. I don't need anybody to answer. I need it on the record, timestamped tonight, that I, the sole responsible party, am formally withdrawing funding and authorization, and that the outstanding balances are not to be drawn against me. I want the email sent tonight, with tonight's date and time on them, because I know how these people operate. By tomorrow morning, Marguerite is going to be on the phone, spinning this 6 ways before the facts are even in. I want the facts in writing first. I want there to be no version of tomorrow where she gets to tell the story before the truth does. And Renata, God bless her, she let out this little laugh. Not a mean one, a respectful one. You really did read every contract, didn't you, she said. I read everything before I sign it, I told her. It's the only reason a woman like me ever ends up with anything. Nobody hands us the benefit of the doubt, so we keep it in writing. Give me an hour, she said. I'll draft and send the formal withdrawal notices to every vendor tonight, time-stamped, and I'll follow up with calls first thing. And Opal, she paused. Are you sure? Once these go out, this is real. Ren is going to be devastated, and I looked down at my hands, the scar catching the lamplight, and I thought about row 6. I thought about that invitation with no Tyndall on it anywhere. I thought about 18 years of recitals in the back in my work clothes, and a cake I was going to bake at 3 in the morning so somebody else could take the credit. Ren is going to be devastated either way, I said quietly. She can be devastated as a girl who finds out her mother has a limit, or she can stay comfortable as a girl who learns her mother has none. One of those is worth something to her someday. The other one just costs her later. Send the notices sending them, Renessa said. Go to bed, Opal. You did a hard right thing tonight. I did not go to bed. I sat in my recliner with that green folder in my lap, and I waited, because I knew the way a mother knows that Wren was going to call. I knew it before she knew it herself. And here's what was happening on the other end during that hour, because I pieced it together later. Renata is thorough and she is fast. She drafted the withdrawal notices, and she sent them that night, every one, time-stamped between 11:30 and midnight. Now, a notice in an inbox at 11:30 doesn't get read at 11:30. But here's the thing people don't understand about how these events actually work. The Wickersham, that fancy country club venue, they had a final payment due in 9 days. $36,000 across all the vendors, due in a week and change. And every cent of it was coming from one account, mine. When that withdrawal hit, the vendors did the only sensible thing a vendor does. They went looking for who was going to cover the balance now, and they went to the Ashfords. Because the Ashfords were the family, the Ashfords were the name on the crest, the Ashfords were hosting, right? It said so on the invitation. So sometime in the next day, quietly, the venue and the caterer went to Cabot and Marguerite Ashford, and they said, "The responsible party has withdrawn. We need $36,000 to keep this booking. Can you cover it?" And the Ashfords could not cover it. That's the part I need you to really sit with, because this is the part that matters. I didn't blow up that wedding. I want that on the record. All I did was stop paying for it. The wedding fell apart because the moment my money stepped out of the room, there was nobody left who could afford to keep the lights on. The Ashfords were given the chance, the actual chance, to step up and pay for their own son's wedding. And they couldn't write the check. They never could have. The whole gleaming thing, the crest, the senator, the 400 guests, the front rows for the people who mattered, all of it had been propped up the entire time by a cake lady's checkbook. And the second I closed it, the whole set fell down like the cardboard it always was. My phone lit up at 5 past midnight. Wren, I let it ring twice, not to be cruel. To steady myself, then I answered Mom. She was already crying, the words tumbling out on top of each other. Mom, what did you do? I can't sleep. I feel sick. I sent you that text and I have this awful feeling. What did you mean, keep the 40,000? What does that mean, Mom? The wedding's in 3 weeks. What did you do? Now listen to me close here, because this is the part the title turns on. She wasn't calling because a vendor called her. The vendors hadn't reached anybody yet. It was midnight. She was calling because of the text, my 6 words. Then I'll keep the 40,000 and you can keep the seat. She'd been lying in the dark for an hour with those words in her stomach, and the awful feeling had finally driven her to the phone. She was calling to argue, to undo it, to get me to take it back. And she had no idea it was already done, that while she'd been lying there, my lawyer had already sent the notices. The thing she was calling to stop had been over for half an hour. That's what the title means when it says my lawyer called first. Not first, as in early in the morning. First, as in before my daughter could even cry. By the time she dialed my number, the truth was already in writing, time-stamped, gone. She was calling to undo something that no phone call on earth could undo anymore. I did exactly what I told you I'd do, sweetheart, I said, and my voice was calm. A lifetime of staying calm while the oven alarm screams. You told me I could come if I still paid, but not to expect a seat up front. I told you I'd keep the 40,000 and you could keep the seat. I'm a woman of my word, Wren. I kept the 40,000. But you can't, she said, and now there was panic climbing up into it. Mom, everything's booked, everyone's invited. The invitations went out. Marguerite's gonna, why would you do this to me? And there it was. Why would you do this to me? As if I were the one who'd done something. As if the 8 months and row 6 and the cake with another name on it and just handle the money. As if all of that had just been weather. And my one action was the only cruelty in the whole story. Wren, I said, and I said it gentle. Because I love her, and because I could hear that the girl underneath was scared. I want you to hear me, because I'm only going to say this once tonight, and then we're both going to try to sleep. I did not do this to you. I declined to keep doing something to myself. I have been treated by the people you chose like a checkbook with a pulse. And tonight, my own daughter told me in writing that I could pay for her wedding but not sit at the front of it. So I made a choice. I chose my own dignity over their party. And I'd have thought you, of all the people on this earth, would understand why. She didn't understand, not that night. That night, she was still too deep in it, too scared of what Marguerite would say. You're being selfish, she said, and I could hear it wasn't even really her. It was the script. It was Marguerite's voice coming out of her one more time. It's my wedding, and you're blowing it up because of your ego. Because you didn't get a nice enough chair. A nice enough chair, I said, and I let it sit there a second. Ren, it was the front row at your wedding. It was the one seat in that entire room that was only ever mine. Your daddy should have been in the seat next to it, except he left when you were too little to remember. So it was just mine, one seat, the only one in the whole place that belonged to me. And you and Marguerite decided a banker and a senator you've met twice should sit in it instead. Silence on the line. I could hear her breathing. I didn't blow up your wedding over a chair, I said. You and Marguerite blew it up when you decided the chair mattered more than the mother sitting in it. I just stopped paying for the privilege of being told so. She was crying harder now, but it had changed. The quality of it had changed. There was confusion in it. Confusion is what it sounds like when a script starts to crack and the real person starts to come back through. And then she said something, almost a whisper, and it was the first true thing she'd said all night. Marguerite's going to lose her mind, she said. She'll never, Mom. The Ashfords can't cover this. Spencer told me they don't have it. She stopped. I heard her hear herself. On you, I finished for her. Real soft. They've been counting on you the whole time. On the cake lady's checkbook. That's the part that ought to make you the angriest. Baby, if you ever follow it all the way down, they looked down on me and they leaned on me in the exact same breath. They needed me invisible and they needed me paying at the same time from the same person. The only one in this entire story who was ever asked to be both invisible and was me. She didn't answer, but she didn't hang up either. And that, I knew, was the beginning of something turning. The confrontation came 2 days later, because people like Marguerite cannot leave a closed door closed. She needs the last word the way she needs the name. She showed up at my house unannounced, with Spencer trailing in behind her like a man walking to his own scolding. And Wren came, too, because Wren called me an hour before and asked if she could be there, and I said yes. I wanted my daughter in that room. I wanted her to see this with her own two eyes. I let them in, because I am not afraid of anybody in my own kitchen. Marguerite swept in like she was inspecting a property she might condescend to buy. She took in my kitchen, the linoleum, the work boots by the door, the index card recipe framed on the wall, and I watched her file every bit of it under beneath me. She sat down at my table without being asked. Opal, she said, we're going to sort this out like adults. You've made your little point, very dramatic. Everyone's terribly impressed by your independence. Now you'll restore the funding. We'll find you a perfectly nice seat, perhaps not the very front, but somewhere dignified, and we'll put this unpleasantness behind us. The invitations are out. The Ashford name is on the line. Senator Holloway is expecting to attend. And there it was, the name she'd been saving, Holloway. She set it down on my table like a trump card, like the mention of a state senator was going to make the cake lady go pale and fold. I poured 3 cups of coffee. I set them down. I sat across from her with my scarred hands around my own cup, and I said, Marguerite, let me make sure I've got your offer right. You'd like me to pay $40,000, and in exchange, I may sit somewhere dignified, but not the front. Have I got that right? That's a more than reasonable, it's the same offer, I said. You've just used nicer words this time. The answer's still no. And that's when her polish finally cracked, and the thing underneath came out, and my daughter got to watch it come out bare. Do you have any idea, Marguerite said, her voice rising, what it has cost this family to absorb this marriage? To explain to people that Spencer is marrying the daughter of a woman who bakes cakes in a strip mall. We have given your daughter a name, access, a future she could never have dreamed of where she came from. The very least you could do is fund the celebration quietly, and let the people who actually understand society handle the things that matter, instead of throwing a tantrum over a chair like some common grasping careful, I said. It was quiet, but something in it stopped her cold. Common, I said. Say it, Marguerite. You've been chewing on it for 8 months. Common. Grasping the cake lady who forgot her place. I set my cup down. Here's what's interesting to me. In this entire arrangement, only one family has been grasping at the other one's money, and it wasn't mine. I never asked you for a dime. Not one. You needed $40,000 from me to throw a party you couldn't afford, so you could feel like the somebody your bank account stopped saying you were about 20 years ago. She went white, then red. That's a lie, she hissed. Is it? I said, and I turned to Spencer. Spencer, look at your mother and tell me the Ashfords can write a $36,000 check tomorrow morning to save this wedding. Go on. Tell me right now, and I'll apologize, and I'll put every dollar back this afternoon. And Spencer looked at the table. My future son-in-law looked down at his own hands on my linoleum table, and he did not say one word. The silence in that kitchen said all of it. There were buckets in his mother's hallway, and he knew it, and he could not look at me. And Wren watched her fiancé sit there in silence while his mother called her mother common. I saw it land on her face. I saw the exact second the gleaming Ashford world lost its shine for good. I reached over to the counter and I picked up the green folder. I set it on the table between us, and I opened it, and I started laying the contracts out one at a time, the way you lay down cards when the hand is already won. These are the contracts for your son's wedding, Marguerite, I said. The venue, the caterer, the florist, the band. Read the signature line on any one of them. She didn't move. So I read it for her. Opal Tyndall, Opal Tyndall, Opal Tyndall, everyone. Not Ashford, not Wren, not Spencer, mine. I am the responsible party on all of it, because I am a businesswoman. And a businesswoman does not hand frightened, grasping people $40,000 and trust them to be kind to her. You spent 8 months treating me like a checkbook, Marguerite, and in 8 months, not one of you ever once thought to read the checkbook. If you had, you'd have seen that the cake lady held the only authority in the entire wedding from the very first day. I could have taken your venue and your senator and your crested invitations off the board any morning I chose. I just kept hoping, right up until 11:04 Tuesday night, that I wouldn't have to. She stared at those contracts with her name nowhere on them. You told my daughter, I said, to tell me to just handle the money and let the people who matter handle what matters. So that is exactly what I did. I handled the money. I took it back. Now you go on and handle what matters: the venue, the caterer, the senator, the 400 guests. Without it, I closed the folder. Let me know how that goes for you. And then, from over by the counter where she'd been standing silent this whole time, watching, my daughter spoke in a small, clear, completely changed voice. She's right, Wren said. The whole room turned to look at her. She crossed that kitchen. She walked right past Spencer, right past Marguerite, and she came and she stood next to me, next to the cake lady. And she took my scarred hand in both of hers, the burned arm, the one I used to hide in July, and she held it like it was something precious, the way nobody in that gleaming family had ever once held anything of mine. I'd rather sit in row 6 next to my mother, Wren said, looking right at Marguerite, than in the front row next to the people who put her there. Marguerite's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. Spencer was still staring at the floor like the answer to his whole life might be written in my linoleum. And for the first time since I'd met her, the great Marguerite Ashford had nothing to say, because the floor she'd been standing on her whole life had just turned out to be mine. She stood up so fast her chair scraped. You'll regret this, she said, and her hands were shaking, not with sorrow, with the particular fury of a person who has just discovered the ground was never hers. You have humiliated this family. Do you understand what people are going to say? That the Ashford wedding collapsed because the bride's mother, the cake lady, threw a tantrum and pulled her money over a chair. Yes, I said, and I was calm. That's exactly what people are going to say, and every single working person in this county who hears it is going to understand me completely. You ought to worry less about what people will say, Marguerite, and a lot more about what's true. You wanted my money and not my face. And it turns out you can't have one without the other anymore. Those days are over. She looked at Ren one more time, my daughter's hands still wrapped around mine, and I watched her understand that she'd lost that too. Then she walked out. Spencer went after her. He stopped at the door, and he looked back, and for just a second I thought, here it is. Here's the moment he becomes a man. Here's where he says, my mother was wrong about yours. And he opened his mouth, and then he closed it, and he followed his mother out to the car. Ren watched him go, and I felt her hand tighten around mine, and I knew she'd seen exactly what I'd seen. A man who, given the one chance that mattered, chose silence. The same silence she'd been living in for 8 months. The same silence I'd watched swallow her whole. Here's how it all shook out. Because I know you want the ledger and not just the feeling. I've always believed in a clean ledger. The grand Ashford wedding never happened. There was no version of it the Ashfords could pay for themselves, which is the whole truth of the Ashfords in a single sentence. The Wickersham released the date. The crested invitations went in a drawer somewhere, and I expect they're still there. The senator went to somebody else's party, and my $40,000, the 36 I never paid, and the deposits I let go as the cost of getting clear, stayed right where it had been earned. In my account, in my name, and the engagement. The engagement didn't end in a blow-up. It ended in a fade, which is how the weekend things. Spencer never did call to defend Ren, or me, or himself, or anything. He just got quieter and quieter, and the quieter he got, the clearer she saw him. And about 3 weeks after that night in my kitchen, my daughter gave the ring back. I kept waiting for him to turn into a man who'd stand up, she told me, sitting at that same kitchen table where she used to do her homework while my work clothes soaked in the sink. And one day I realized I was watching a documentary about my own life. I'd spent 8 months being exactly what he was being, quiet, comfortable, letting his mother run me. I didn't want to marry the thing I was finally trying to stop being. Marguerite, for her part, told everyone who'd hold still long enough that the cake woman had destroyed the wedding out of spite and class resentment. Let her. Every person in this county who has ever worn a name tag or punched a clock knows precisely what happened and precisely who said they're on. You don't get to bake a community's weddings and christenings and funerals for 26 years without that community knowing exactly who the grasping one was. It wasn't me. It was never me. Now, here's the part I've been wanting to tell you. Here's what I did with the $40,000. And it's the best part, so stay with me. About a month after all this, I'm driving past the old Ashford Mill, the big brick textile building down on the river that their family that's been sitting empty and boarded up for 30 years, the literal source of the and the Ashford money back when there was any. And there's a sign out front, for sale. Commercial property, bank-owned, priced to move, because nobody in their right mind wants a crumbling 30-year empty mill. And I pulled over. And I sat there in my van looking at that building, and I started to laugh, because I'd been needing more space for 2 years. The bakery on Marish Street was bursting at the seams. I'd been turning away wholesale orders I couldn't fill. I had a wait list for wedding cakes running 14 months out. And here was this enormous, beautiful brick building, with light coming through those tall old windows, going for almost nothing because of what it was us. I called Renata. I used the $40,000 as the down payment, and the bank financed the rest against 26 years of a business that actually makes money, which is a thing the Ashfords never once managed to build. I bought the Ashford Mill. The cake lady bought the mill. I put my second kitchen in there, the big production kitchen I'd been dreaming about. And in the front half, the part with all that beautiful light, I put in a teaching kitchen, free classes. For single mothers mostly, the way I was a single mother. Women who need a skill and a paycheck and somebody to tell them they can be anybody. Because somebody told me that once, my own mother, on an index card, and I have never once forgotten what it's worth to be told. And I put my daughter's name on the deed, right next to mine. Tyndall and Tyndall, the symbol of everything the Ashfords used to be, the thing they built their whole crown on, the building with their name carved over the door, became the foundation under me and my girl. I had the stonemason leave the old Ashford name up there, actually. People ask me why. I tell them I like the reminder. A name carved in stone doesn't mean a thing if the family under it can't carry it. The carving stays the same, the people change. That's the whole lesson of this story in one piece of limestone. We opened on a Saturday in the spring, and the morning of the opening, I did the thing I'd been waiting months to do. I baked a cake, not a wedding cake. A great big celebration cake, 4 tiers, lemon elderflower, the same flavor Wren had picked for a wedding that never happened. And I put it right in the front window of that mill where everybody could see it. And on the little card next to it, in my own handwriting, it said, Tyndall's Bakehouse. Made here, by us. You remember the program that was going to tell 400 people my cake came from Beaulieu, the cake they wanted my hands to make and my name to disappear from. Well, there it sat, in the window of the building that used to belong to the people who tried to erase me, with my name on it, in my writing, where God and everybody could see exactly whose hands had made it. And you want to know who walked through the door first that morning? Senator Bram Holloway. The man Marguerite had been saving like a trump card. Turns out, and I'd known this the whole time, I just never bothered to say it in that kitchen because I didn't need to. Bram Holloway has been a customer of mine for 25 years. I made his wedding cake. I made his daughter's birthday cakes, all 4 of them, every year. The man proposed to his wife over a slice of my lemon cake before half this county was even born. When Marguerite set his name down on my table like it would scare me, she had no idea she was naming one of my oldest and dearest customers. He came to my opening and he stood up in front of the whole crowd and he said a few words about how Opal Tyndall had been quietly feeding the best days of this county's life for a quarter-century, and I had to go in the back so nobody would see me cry into the buttercream. Wren runs the teaching kitchen now. She left advertising. She's good at it, better than she ever was at the other thing, because this one's real. The other day, I heard her on the phone with a vendor, and she said, yes, my mother owns it. She built it from a rented oven. And you'll want to read your contract carefully, she added, because she does. And she winked at me across the floor. She hung a little framed thing by the door of the teaching kitchen. It's a photograph she took herself of my arm. Scar, the white shiny burn, from the second year, the one I used to hide in July, and underneath it she wrote, these hands built everything. They did. They surely did. I ran into Marguerite once, months later, in the produce aisle at the grocery store. She had a small basket. She saw me, and I watched the old reflex cross her face, that little flinch of a person deciding whether to acknowledge the help. And then I watched her remember how it had all turned out, who'd held the contracts, whose daughter had chosen whom, whose name was on the mill now. And she gave me a small, tight nod, and she looked away first. I didn't gloat. There's no satisfaction in it, in the end. Marguerite is a frightened woman, guarding an empty name in a house with buckets in the hall, and that is a harder life than mine for all her crystal. I've got 60 people on my payroll now between the 2 locations. A daughter who took my hand in front of the people she was scared of, and a company built by these 2 ruined, beautiful hands. I'd rather be the cake lady. I have always rather been the cake lady. It's the truest thing I ever was. I nodded back at her, polite, and I went on with my shopping. I had a teaching class to get back to the good kind of work, the kind where the gift and the giver get to stay in the same room. People ask me sometimes if I regret it. Canceling my own daughter's wedding 3 weeks out. Such a drastic thing, they say. Couldn't you have just talked it through? I talked it through for 8 months. Talking is what they count on. Talking is how they keep you in row 6. They'll let you talk forever, as long as you keep paying and you never act. So no, I don't regret a single thing. Not the 6 words I sent, not the call to Renata at 11 at night, not the contracts I quietly signed in my own name a year before I ever knew I'd need them. Because the lesson my daughter learned that month about who she was and where she came from, and what a woman with self-respect actually does when she's disrespected, that lesson was worth more than any wedding. You cannot buy a lesson like that. You can only show it. And I showed it with the only things I've ever had to teach with. 2 scarred hands, a green folder of contracts, and the word no. So let me leave you with this. I'm going to say it slow, because I mean it. And because I think somebody listening needs to hear it tonight. Your kindness is a gift. It is not a tax. The day someone tries to keep your open hand and turn away your face, the day they want what you give but not who you are, that is the day they have turned your kindness into a leash. And when that happens, you set it down. You love people with everything you've got. You give until it feels warm in your chest. That's what we're here for. But you never, ever pay for the privilege of being treated as less than. 26 years of these hands bought me both the money and the dignity, and they cost me exactly the same to earn. I am not going to spend one to keep the other, not for a chair, not for a name, not even, God help me, for my own girl, because the best thing I ever gave her wasn't the wedding I canceled. It was watching her mother finally stand up. Keep your dignity and your generosity in the same hand. They were always meant to be carried together. That's my story. One text, one call to my lawyer, and $40,000 that came home where it belonged. If it reminded you that your worth was never up for a vote, then do me a favor and drop a comment. Tell me where you're listening from, and I'll see you next time.